Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Third Eye Edify podcast. I'm your host, George Mesa, and today is going to be a really special show for a number of reasons. Most importantly, this is technically my first recording. It may not end up being the very first released episode, but this is the very first thing I'm doing. So I want everyone to know that this episode has a special place in my heart, and that's why I have such a special guest with me. This is a good friend of mine for a countless amount of years. We're not young guys anymore. And I want to introduce to you Spero Gineros. This man has done so much in the past almost 20 years that I've known him regarding health, dieting, and a number of other things. He's been a personal trainer. And, I think I'll let him go from here. Spero, why don't you tell us exactly how you came to be the person that you are in this field that we're going to talk about today, health, fitness, and give him a little background, education, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be doing this with you on the first episode.
Thank you.
And yeah, so how did my health journey come to be? I would just say I was created for it. If I don't operate on a certain way, I feel it mentally, physically, spiritually. So it's almost destined for me to kind of, for my path to fall the way it did.
That's wonderful. I feel the same way about this show, as a matter of fact. I've been telling my wife for years, I have to do this. I've been saying it just like that. And, before podcasts were even a thing, I remember podcasts being mentioned in the early 2000s, maybe even the late 90s. We heard about it on an AOL Instant Messenger group, me and my friend, back then. This is a little bit just before I met you, as a matter of fact. And this podcasting is not that new. And right?
Howard Stern had him back in the day, right?
That's a very good point. And he was at the forefront because he was already had the whole setup. He might as well put it in podcast form. I'm sure he had a manager telling him what the new stuff was at the time and the best outreach for all his fans and stuff.
Right.
But the passion is almost a requirement in reality. It's almost a requirement because people are always like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's not necessarily true as far as the work element. And we'll definitely talk about what the word work means maybe a little later in regards to energy and stuff like that. But keep going. What was your education? You found a path with education as well, which I, as a musician, did the same thing. I did take the path of education in college. And explain that maybe.
I was actually thinking even earlier, just to start really.
For sure.
I was thinking of, as you were talking, what really pushed me in the direction of health. And when I was younger, I would hear stories of family members that died early and had heart disease and this, that, and the other. So from such an early age, the concept of doing the right thing for myself so I don't get sick was imprinted in my head. And I kind of had my family history to observe that. And so that was where it started. And then as I got older, it was I had a good experience in high school with my phys ed teacher. So I was I'm going to go to school, be a phys ed teacher,
Right.
But when you're that age, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know the politics behind anything, or really, it's one thing what you observe as a job. It's another thing what you do as a job. So that was the next step, was going to college and being a physical educator. So if I was gonna portray that persona, I have to walk it. I can't just preach it. There's nobody likes the phys ed teacher that's super overweight and out of shape. They're not an athlete. And it's I can't be that, So that was the next path. It was trying to understand what my family did wrong initially, and then it went all right, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to educate myself the right way.
Yeah, of course.
And that was part two.
Yeah, that's great. The little education comment, I think that might be a conversation for a whole nother day. But we will get into some of that because the way that people are educated about things like health, anything, science, technology, there's often something of a barrier. And what I mean by that is there's you're too dumb to know it, so I'm going to tell you it, where the experts are the only ones in the know. And
Right.
there's
Right.
plenty of ways to find out a lot about, your own personal body just by experimenting, and not in a way that's, obviously detrimental to yourself, but
Right.
there's plenty to be learned on your own before you ever inquire an expert's help. And
Right.
you might even just ask a neighbor or a friend or a family member who at least knows a little something about it. You don't always go to an expert. They cost money half the time, and they should. Your
Right.
services shouldn't be free whatsoever. You have so much experience and lots of other things, and maybe we can get into that. Because you've done, as far as I know, long as we've known each other, you've been
Right.
on a diet roller coaster.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would say that you're pretty in shape person overall. But being the person going through all these diets and analyzing yourself, I'm sure you don't feel 100% right about that. So just tell the viewers exactly, not every single one, but just give us a little idea about what this diet roller coaster has been like for you and what the astonishing results you've come up with lately are, as far as how much you've changed your diet, radically changed it, full
Right.
180, in my opinion.
Definitely. Definitely. So I guess it started in high school. I started with Weight Watchers. So I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
that was general, like, just count what you're putting in your body.
Right.
Right. So that, but I was like doing Weight Watchers, but I was eating bread and ketchup. Like that was like half my diet of the day, like just
Right.
bread and like, yeah, just sugar and sugar, more sugar. So, and then from there, it started turning into like the standard, like have grilled chicken, don't eat sweets, don't have sugars, you know. I don't even think at that point I even considered carbohydrates being like an issue of like weight gain. Like I had no idea like what insulin was or how blood sugar affected weight gain. Like I was
Right.
totally clueless still at that point. So, so I probably just had some grilled chicken, but I would still eat, like tons of. I don't think at that point, like I probably stopped counting everything, and I was
Right.
just starting to eat more, and I was just eating grilled chicken and vegetables. I was like really big on eating more vegetables because like that's what you hear,
Of
you
course.
know. I did something, so there's that. I've tried something called the 4 Hour Body, which is a
Mm.
restrictive diet. So it's like you eat, the only carbohydrates you could eat are like lentils and barleys and certain things, maybe a few nuts, things like that.
Right.
Um, and then from there, I started like I was like checking out bodybuilders. So then I got more of like a bodybuilding style diet. So then it was like more like meat and grilled chicken, eggs, sweet potatoes, rice, broccoli, string beans, things like that. And that
Right.
was salads and whatnot. So that was like I kind of like swayed to that. And then I started looking into what goes on in farms. So watching documentaries and seeing the abuse and the lifestyles and the way animals were fed, I started looking at things like, well, why should I be eating meat if it's so tainted? So
Exactly.
then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give up meat, and that was like a thing in the like, as you know, in the Greek religion for Lent, you'll give
Right.
up meat for the week for Holy Week for like right before Easter, right? So I think that's where it started. I was like, all right, I'm gonna give up meat for a whole week. I'll do that for Christ. I'll do that for Lent. I'll do that for a good spiritual cause.
Right. And if I can interject for 1 second,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
Spero is full Greek, and I am half Greek. So that's why I said his name Gineros. That would have been the correct pronunciation. But if you want to say it, how do you usually say it for everyone?
right. Generos is the Greek way, and
Right.
generos is the American way.
Generos.
Yeah,
Yeah, I said it that way. I gave it the Greek tinge because we're
that's not.
we're fellow Greeks. So I just wanted to mention that. But just moving on. You can go ahead and keep going though.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened was I guess the meat that I was eating was just the most processed, horribly quality meat.
Right.
By me giving up that meat, I felt better, because maybe the other things that I was eating just wasn't as processed. So it gave my body a break. So I was like,
Sure.
wow, I feel amazing. So I was like, forget about Lent and all that. I'm just not going to eat meat anymore.
Right.
Everyone's vegan, everyone's vegetarian. This is the right thing to do. This is going to save the planet and all these other things that were so pushed. It's and like that's what I believed. Why? Because that was the research that was the path I went down. Like I didn't choose to like go down all the paths of research. I found the one that made sense in the moment. And it has a lot to do with the people you're hanging around with. Like the people that I was hanging with at that time, that's what they were researching. So I was like,
Right.
I had like camaraderie on and other people that I was like collaborating ideas with to learn all this stuff,
Interesting.
So then it was like it went from vegetarian, and then I started giving up like cheese and started giving up eggs and everything. So I was like turned into a straight vegan.
Right.
And I lived that way for 5 years.
Yeah, you did that one for a while, if I remember correctly.
Long time. It was a very long time not having meat, not having any kind of protein, like not having any animal-based protein. Like I would get protein, but I would get it from all these supplements and all these like seeds and nuts and all kinds of like random things, that they put on the market to say, okay, you could be a vegan or a vegetarian and you can get all the protein and all the things that you need. So I did that for a while, and I did that probably up until recently. And then a couple of years ago, I started looking at other like I'm trying to think of the X factor that did it. I think I went out and like it was like sushi. I think I went out for like somebody invited me out for sushi, and they're like, oh, like would you have sushi? Or oh no, you're not. You're a vegan, and I'm like,
Right.
A little sushi, like
Right.
what could they have fed the fish, and how hard of a life could the fish have? Because I'm going by like that was the reason I stopped eating meat anyway.
And it's a very logical conclusion to come to. I mean, fish are
Right.
obviously, I would assume, not as tortured. I mean, some of them are farmed, and that's not great for them. But are they aware of it?
Right.
It's hard to know. I don't know how they
Exactly.
work.
Right. So I would say that was the icebreaker for me to like start getting me back on eating animal products was fish, and that's all. That was the only like animal based product I had. And then then I was in Tennessee, and I was living down there, and somebody brings into the gym one day fresh eggs from their farm, and I'm talking to them, and they, the chickens eat off the land,
Right.
all organic, not processed. They live a clean life. And I said to myself, same concept. I'm like, well, if you have the fish, because the fish aren't tortured and the fish are okay, then why wouldn't you have the eggs if the chickens are okay?
Right.
So I was like, all right, I could have eggs. So I was like, I'll have eggs and I'll have fish. So then it started with that. And then when I would come home to visit New York, on breaks and stuff, I would, I heard of a place called Burger Village. So Burger Village had things like elk, ostrich, boar,
I see.
all these exotic meats. And I'm like, there's not enough of these animals to go through this like massive production that goes on in these, these slaughterhouses.
Like the farms. Right.
Right. So then I started having some meat again, and I would have those meats, and I would always say, like, it doesn't bother me. Like, I feel okay,
Right.
So that's kind of like how I slowly crept meat and animal products back into my diet. I looked for the cleanest of all of them.
Right. All right. Well,
and then,
now, go ahead. Go finish.
Yeah. So that was, I guess that's pretty much, now we're almost at where I'm at now. So
right, and that's what. Let's hold off on where you're at now. Let's get to that in a sec. Well, I guess a quick question I have about the story that you just told is, what was the general consensus in your college classmates? What were they talking about their own diets? Were they all into that, or were they really just there to focus on the schoolwork? What was the overall, what was the back and forth between you and your classmates, I guess, as far as this exact topic?
Okay, so when it comes to this stuff, like, I would buy like all these. There was something called the Queens Health Emporium right down the road from Queens College.
Right.
So I would pick up all of these exotic drinks, kombuchas, and it was like the early days of kombucha,
right.
And these like specialty breads that were made there, and any kind of like funky, weird, different type of like fruit or snack. I would always bring that into class.
Right.
And people would like look at me like, "Yo, what you got there?" I'm like, "Oh, I got the healthy shit, I got the good stuff," And I think those were the days when I first started realizing how processed like the food was here.
Sure.
Now I was still eating it. I wasn't like full blown. I think I was still learning about it. Because I do remember in class, like, nobody cared. Like, these people were all going to be physical educators, but they were just in their early 20s. They could eat whatever they want. They were all athletic people, so it didn't really matter what they ate.
Interesting.
You know, and
Yeah.
I was one of the only people that seriously cared about like what I was putting in my body, like and wanted to go off the rails. Like I
Right.
didn't want to stay on the rails the way everybody else was eating. I was like, this is not definitely not right. You know,
Wow.
that was kind of how the whole atmosphere was back then, and no one was like a master in. There was even like a pro gymnast that was in our. There was
Really?
a pro gymnast in my major. There was a pro minor league football player, like a AFL,
Oh,
like an
cool.
indoor football player. You know, and this guy and this girl, like they didn't even, you know, they weren't like a pro bodybuilder where like they're gonna measure out every ounce of
Right.
chicken and
Right.
every ounce of potato and every ounce of vegetable, and like they weren't. It wasn't like that. It was like nobody gave a hoot.
Yeah, they weren't
And
measuring every curve on their body to see what part of the, what part of the animal
no,
gives them the best results in the arm or something crazy like that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's funny because it's like we're learning about the body and how to optimize like performance in sports and how to like and no one showed any interest or any care in the world about any of that. Everybody just ate normal food, whatever.
I have a similar experience with when I went to music college. A lot of students around me were, obviously it's a different thing altogether, but when you
Right,
cultivate anything, even if it's an art
right,
form or your own health, you get
right,
certain modalities, you do certain things. And what I specifically remember is most of my classmates were confused as to why they had to do a 30-page history paper or music history or write out piano parts and I have to play piano. And I was thinking, what are you doing here? Did that come
right.
across your mind? Like, what are you doing here? You're not practicing any of this stuff. How are you going to get better at it? This is the difference between field research and just being a college guy.
All the time. I was just like,
All the time.
what do you people like? What you
Yeah, why
call
are you
yourself
here?
a dictator? Like you don't even care to like, you know, like you're proud that you're shoveling that pizza down your throat.
Right,
Like
right.
listen, I like it too. I love pizza,
Of
but
course.
let's be honest. Like if we're gonna promote health and wellness to young people, like the
Right.
future kids that are growing up and they're gonna need an example to learn from. And it's like acting this way, and like a lot of these people, they just didn't care. They didn't care. They were more into their own competitive drive to be the best. They wanted to be like just outperform the other students, like it was like they were still in high school playing high school sports, and they wanted that's what motivated them to be the best teachers, and that was pretty much the majority of the people that I not to throw all of my
No, of
graduating
course,
class
of course.
on the bus. I mean, probably none of them are watching this, and if they are, good to see you again. But
Right, right. And same for anyone
um,
I went to school with. There were plenty of very, very talented and caring and heartfelt individuals there for sure.
right, right. So I mean, great people, but in regard to what we're talking about, when it if it really mattered with health, they really didn't care. You know, they
Right.
really didn't care that much.
That's a big part of what we're raised to do scholastically. I would say Department of Education here in the states. They're often trying to get you to see the next guy as almost a competition, even if it's your neighbor, even if it's a family member. Um, you know, you're going to need to make $100,000. Push yourself, push the other guy down, and make sure you're there. And it's
Right,
never a community involved project. It's always just you. You need this. You need to do this for yourself. And of course, you
right,
do need to do things for yourself. But if
right,
let's just pretend, picture yourself in the flat square in the middle of a community. If you only do something for yourself, the entire community, including your family that you live with, will not benefit. You have to think
right,
of everything you're surrounded by.
right,
It's another thing that financially a lot of people fail because they don't allow the money to flow through them and all their surroundings. They just say they want to make the $1 million the first year. And unless
right,
you're in that kind of business, which I guess exists on something like Wall Street and maybe other things I'm not naming right now, that
right,
doesn't really happen. It doesn't really work. And it might
right,
work for a while too. That's the worst part about it. It's almost like a disease that you don't even realize you have. It works at first, but then
yeah,
suddenly 10 years later, you haven't done one thing. You haven't seen one baseball game. You haven't been to the beach, and then
right,
you know where that goes. It's never good, and
right,
it's all in the
right,
pursuit of money. I mean, it seems to be that whole competitive spirit and ends up being because of money. And
right.
that
Well,
was a little
that's
side note.
when you put it that way, that's interesting because that's what happened to me at one part of my life with everything, with health, with recreational activities, socially getting together with friends and girls and all that stuff. Like I focused on my job so
Mm.
much when I was a train conductor for the Long Island Railroad. My whole life fell apart. I fell to drugs. I fell to alcohol. I fell to so much, and then everything else just fell apart because it was just. I mean, shit. I made $100,000 a year. It worked. I
Right.
got it, but it didn't work because even if I made $200,000 a year, I was so miserable. I couldn't put any money away. I was just pissing it all away because of just to compensate from the misery, and just kind of goes
Sure.
exactly what you're saying, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very common story. And
Right.
it's a work-life balance that there is no balance. If you picture the scales of Libra or something, it's not there. There's no, it's this, one's all the way down and one's all the way up. And that's
Right.
not how it works in any, part of anyone's life. It's a real shame
Right.
that it does come to that point, though. And we're
Right.
certainly trained to be that way. We're certainly
Yep.
trained to be that way. I remember
Yep.
almost every single group project I've ever done in any classroom, in any school, preschool, regular school, college. There's always the one guy that does everything, and then maybe one of the two other people help, and the other ones are getting the free grade. And that's
Right. Right. Right.
it's and it's allowed though. The thing is, the
Right.
teacher, because you're graded as a group, and then in that scenario, the person that gives the best work is getting the same results as everyone else, and that's also a weird thing that doesn't seem to be. Maybe it's on purpose, maybe it isn't. We're not here to tell you that
Right.
the whole world's against you, but we are here to mention that there are some kinds of forces trying to bring you down for sure, at least in this part of the world, potentially everywhere else. And by the way, we're not medical doctors and we're not offering medical advice at all. We're offering
Right.
expertise from decades of experience.
Right.
This is certainly no attempt to make you automatically change your life overnight, because that doesn't exist either. There's no magic pill that's gonna make you lose all your weight and make you a pristine bodybuilder looking type person in one day. It's never going to happen. Your entire lifestyle has to change around the ideas of what you have for your diet, your health. Same thing as a musician. Everyone's like, I'm not getting good. It's only been a month or two. It's like, I can't do anything yet. You're like, you gotta keep going. You gotta do this for a long time. Things don't come quickly. You gotta change everything
Right.
about what you do. Your whole mentality has to change on top of everything else. Your
Right.
spirituality even will benefit you. I often instruct students to breathe in the time that they're playing, metronome time, let's say, where we have this. Try to breathe at this rate, and you'll actually be able to play at that tempo better because you're putting
Right.
your whole body into this whole thing. If you're
Thinking
sitting there,
your best. Yeah.
yeah, if you're sitting there stiff, you can't really do much, musically
Right.
speaking. And also, stagnation is not a good thing in nature anyway. Stagnant water tends to get pretty nasty pretty fast. And when water
Right.
starts flowing, like let's say out of a hose or something, you see dogs go straight up to that thing, try to lick the flowing water because they know better.
Right.
They know that's the
Right.
better water
Right.
for sure.
Right. Sure.
So
Yeah.
let's now we did sidetrack, but let's go right back to where you're pretty much where you're ending up now, because I want to kind of go off on a few tangents from here. But you have essentially gone complete 180 in your ideas of diet. So why don't you let the
Right.
viewers know exactly where you're at now?
Right. Okay. So a thing like I said in the very beginning of the show, a big part of why I do what I do, and I mentioned destiny, and I mentioned that I was chosen for this. I have a lot of, you wouldn't look at me and you wouldn't think it, but I have a lot of like internal health ailments that stop me or prevent me or whatever, hinder me from doing things or from living and feeling normal and feeling pleasant. So one of my biggest issues is I have nasal polyps. I have cysts in my nose, and those inflame to the point where that my whole I can't breathe.
Right.
So that's my biggest factor, where if I put something in my body, that's going to respond the most sensitively. So if I eat something, or if I don't eat, when I fast, if I just do like a water fast, I'm not putting anything in my body but water and maybe sea moss or something, and there's no inflammation. But there's also times where I'll have some meat or I'll have something, and I don't get any inflammation. But what I noticed was I was constantly inflamed,
Right.
constantly having issues breathing. I would have to spray some steroid nose spray up my nose to like open up my nasal patch just so I could breathe and feel comfortable,
Right.
And this is something that I've been dealing with for years. You know, I had surgery for this when I was 20.
Wow.
It came back heavy, like, you know, quite a few years after that. And
Right.
now for the last 5 years or so, I've been like suffering almost to the point of like, I literally have to, you know, I live with this nose spray on hand,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because I need it, you know. But something that changed, I looked into the carnivore community.
Right.
So if anybody's not familiar with carnivore diet, it's basically eating, depending on how strict you go and you know your style, it's pretty much an animal based diet exclusively. And I was like, I got to try it. You know, I've tried everything.
Yeah. Right. You tried
And
everything
now
but that, as far as I know, up until
everything
that point.
but that, right. And I'm like, if there's one thing that amongst all my diets, like ever since the very beginning, even when I was telling you back in, you know, even back on the first time when I was doing Weight Watchers in high school, I was
Right.
always having vegetables, constantly eating vegetables. So no matter what diet I did, I never cut that out. And the carnivore diet, that's the requirement. You're not eating any vegetables on purpose. Like, so I went within a couple of days of only eating, you know, grass-fed ground beef, like organic hen eggs or duck eggs. What else did I? I guess I had some grass-fed steaks. I really kept it simple, you know. Inflammation in my body was completely gone. I could breathe. I could tell from my nose. I could tell from my lower back. I could tell
Right.
from my joints. And I'm like, this is crazy. You know, and this can't be like, I'm all about like placebo effect is a thing, you know,
For
but
sure. It definitely is.
this wasn't a placebo effect. Like this was a physical change because what I put in my body was just so different than what I've ever put in my body,
Right.
despite all these different diets that I did. So that's where I'm at now. And I'm getting the greatest results in how I feel, my energy levels, my sleep. Body aches are at its absolute minimum. Strength at the gym is up. Endurance is decent. Like I don't really train for endurance, but I'm able to like keep up a pretty steady workout at the gym and run around a little bit and play handball. And you know, you hear if you don't have carbohydrates, then you're going to have no stored glucose in your cells. Therefore, you're not going to be able to produce the ATP and the whole exercise physiology that goes behind like, having carbohydrates as a main source. It's like this. Now we're getting into like how I was educated and how it's completely off. It's completely off, you know, and there's so much science that backs up how essential carbohydrates are and how there are as human beings our main source of energy. But it's just where is this research coming from? Who's funding this research, and what's behind the agenda to push that? Because the more you dig, the more you could find people that are like, I don't want to say you could find a marathon runner that doesn't eat carbs, because
Right.
maybe on to that level, I can't speak and I can't say I know that, and I can't, you know, try and act like I know better. But all I can speak for is myself, and the the athletic ability that I have now is at its absolute highest, and I'm 35 years old, and
Right.
I'm eating anywhere from 20 to 40 carbs a day. And you know, half of those carbs are coming from like cheese. Like there's like one carbohydrate. If
Right.
I eat half a pound of cheese, there's 8 carbs in a half a pound of cheddar cheese, raw cheddar cheese.
Raw cheddar. Right.
And that's another thing I've included. Now I'm trying to only have raw dairy, which is
Right.
extremely hard to do and find, but it's that's a whole nother aspect of something where it's like, oh my God, it's not pasteurized. Like, you know,
Right.
it's going to kill you. It's actually wrong. It's the other way, like everything else. If it is pasteurized, it's probably going to kill you and create like excessive amounts of mucus in your body and just cause inflammation and all kinds of crazy shit. I guess it depends on person's DNA. Some people could tolerate it more, but you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I honestly do believe my body has a pretty good tolerance for bad things. I've eaten pretty poorly for
Right.
more than half my life, and I did okay. You know, I always had a gut, but I've never been terribly overweight. I've always been able to run and walk and get up out of bed and, you know, all this other stuff, lift up my
Right.
kids, you know, and stuff like that. So I know that I have a tolerance for things, but I'm just a little older. I'm just a little older at 40 now, and I don't think that, you know, I can sense that I need to be even more aware of it than I ever was. And
Right.
maybe that's part of youth, is that you don't have to worry as much, but there's way
Right.
more to that story that I think we might have to save that for another time. But
Right. Right.
perhaps we can, now that we just mentioned the dairy thing and
Yeah.
pasteurization, especially, just thinking about that, I know that even kombucha, a lot of the ones you get off the shelves, they have
Mm.
that bacillus coagulant, and that it's only there. It's the only thing that can survive the pasteurization, and I think that makes it. A lot of people think that that's not what kombucha is. You're not supposed to pasteurize that stuff. It's supposed to
That
just
would
be fermented.
Yeah, that makes sense. That
Raw
yeah.
and fermented, right? And so doing a little research for this conversation, I came across, something I thought I would have at least known about, because I'm pretty aware of what goes on in the world overall, and things that are mentioned, and especially things that are mentioned by USDA, WHO. Well, maybe we can talk more about them later, but I'm going to bring
Yeah.
some up on the screen real quick. They had mentioned this, and I was looking up the food pyramid
Mm.
because I certainly remember that. I mean, it was all over the walls in school in the 80s and 90s for me,
Yep.
and I'm
Me
sure you
too.
remember it too. And
Oh, yeah.
apparently in 2011, they changed it over to My Plate. Now, you were in college at that time for this exact thing.
Right.
So tell me what you know about My Plate. I have a small image on the screen here that gives suggestions up to 5 years old. There's obviously other suggestions for the adults. But what
Right.
changed and why? Why did the food pyramid change? And should we be, especially after the things that have happened in the past few years, this is 2022 that we're recording this now, do we want the same people that told us that you need to get vaccines, you need to wear masks, you need to
Right.
isolate from your family members, do we want those same people to tell us exactly how to eat? Is that
Right.
really the best thing
Right.
for us? I mean, take it as you will, but do think
Right.
about it. There's something to think about there. So what do you know about My Plate? Because I personally know nothing about it. I can't believe it. I never even heard of it.
Okay. So yeah, I remember being in college, and this came into effect. So I remember our nutrition teacher was explaining to us how, okay, this is the new standard, and through extensive research from the American Heart Association, the Food and Drug Administration, all these major
All the big
corporations,
boys.
all the big boys and girls that are affiliated with the pharmaceutical industry, that are funded by all the major corporations that make money off of us being sick. This was
Yep.
the new standard, and I'm what I want to say is probably the food pyramid was just getting old,
Uh-huh.
and they probably just needed like something new, like a new standard to kind of put out there,
Sure.
and they just tweaked it a little bit, like My Plate. I don't all I think what they did was, I think food pyramid emphasized grains as, like, you should be having majority of your calories need to be coming from grains
Oh,
and
really?
bread,
Right.
and that
Right.
was where that was the hyper focus of food pyramid was. My Plate, I want to say, was a little bit more vegetable and fruit based.
Right.
I still want to say that the migraine, my my plate, my plate still pushed grains. But what they
Right.
did was they switched it over, and they're like, "Oh, you should have whole grains." And then there was
Ah,
this big whole grain, whole wheat movement, and
I
people were
remember.
walking around the store with their chest out, and they're like, "Well, I'll take it on whole wheat,"
Yep.
and it's like, yeah, it's actually processed. It comes from the same farm. It's just written differently. It's just a little bit browner. It has absolutely no difference in your blood sugar. It has
Wow.
no difference in anything, and it's just as unhealthy. I think the only way you could push away from that and really be a little bit more healthy is if you have some kind of like sprouted Ezekiel bread, or something
Mm,
along, like, a rye, or
right.
something very, very, like, not processed nearly as much. That would be the closest to having it from my standard, from
Sure.
what I've learned, but they're just trying to say, like, whole wheat is better than white bread. Like, it's the same thing. It's literally the same thing, except they
That's
don't
crazy.
bleach the flour as much. And then they started to
Wow.
push, like, with the dairy. They wanted like low fat, low fat. Well, because the fat is actually what helps our bodies. And by the more they cut the fat out, the more they make it low fat, then the more they have to process it, and they remove what naturally occurs and what gives our bodies the proper probiotics and the proper nutrients and all these things. So it was just a total. They were like, let's just like refocus everybody. Let's make this my plate thing instead of my pyramid or the pyramid, the food pyramid.
Right.
And they kind of just like tweaked it a little bit. And they were just like, let's tell people like, oh, if they have low fat dairy, they'll be healthier. If they have whole grain breads, they'll be healthier. So then we can get people to continue to eat this garbage, really focus on it, and then they think they're even doing a good thing by eating healthier, and they're just hurting themselves even more. And then they create a belief system, and then these people like live and die by it.
It is a belief system, like a lot of other things that I'm sure this show will touch upon through the many podcasts I have planned and interviews. But the other thing that increases, you guessed it, folks, the price, of course, is they've got the label on it. It goes up immediately, especially like organic is another one that the price was almost double sometimes, even on bananas. Right.
So I don't remember much of like trying to think about in college when I almost feel like my professors didn't know enough about it to really like deep dive in it.
It was brand new, in other words.
It was brand new when we were in there, because I think it was towards the end of my college career when it came out. And yeah, that was really it. I think she pushed it and again, I think what they did was it was just like, oh well, it's pretty similar to my pyramid, so let's just keep everything that we have with that, and then we'll just watch the fat, watch the saturated fat, watch the go for the whole grain over the white.
Wow.
They'll figure it out.
They'll figure it. Yeah, just leave it with them. This is how a lot of things happen in the past 2 years. Every teacher had to change their whole everything. I don't even want to get into the details, but it was just go here, just do it. I know that I had a lot of students that were music students, that is, and they were all online at that point because they had to be. And none of them were happy about it for sure, but they, almost all of them that were willing to speak about it, I wasn't prying into it. They were just telling me because they had to talk about their day at some point. Things had changed so radically. They were seeing me on a screen now, for example. And they were the older ones, they were pretty sure that there wasn't a lot of control of what was going on. The teachers weren't, it is nothing about the teachers did the best they could. It's just that nobody had any idea what was going on. Things kept changing every day, it seemed. And it was out of control chaos. The same here, they're just throwing a brand new thing out there, and the curriculum changed immediately. They handed out a completely different syllabus than they did the year before, and that's a big deal when you're going to pay for college. It's a big deal. Kind of turns into a less of return of value, for sure. As far as you're paying for college, you want to get the best you can, and now you might have even had a 20-year experienced teacher, and they had to kind of reset a few things that affects how they can do their thing, and that's not fun at all for anybody.
Right. But I guess really to sum up what your question, all my plate did was promote big business, big agriculture, all the major corporations. It didn't push local farming. It didn't push raw dairy. It didn't push grass-fed, pasture-raised meats. It didn't push organically grown fruit. Vegetables are like a whole other thing. That's like a whole nother. I could dive into that if you want. We could save that for another episode.
That might be a whole episode.
Yeah. But I think vegetables are very, very, very tricky. And I'm just gonna say this and take it. You could take it, and everybody that's watching and listening could take it how they want it. Vegetables could have been the single one food type I was eating that have been hurting me more than ever in my life, and that's going to bring some people down to their knees to think that some of their cancers, their neurological diseases, their inflammation, their spinal structural things, muscular issues. I mean, the list goes on. Anything and everything that you could imagine could be harming us, like from vegetables and seeds and those type of things that are grown. They grow and they exist on a biological level, like when they produce oxalates, they produce lectins, they produce anti-nutrients, they defend themselves. And otherwise, if plants did not defend themselves, they would not be here to this day. They would have died off over the years. And now that when I just give myself vegetables, I can feel my whole face blow up. And I mean, I felt like that always. It wasn't
Right.
now. It was always that way. And I just figured that's just my body. Like,
Sure.
but no, my body was telling me like, dude, this is hurting you, you know? And I've never felt so good not eating vegetables.
Incredible, really. And,
Great.
I think maybe we'll have time to discuss what it takes to grow your own vegetables, because that's a whole nother, work-life balance thing that we can discuss. It's
Right.
it's unreal, but maybe before we do that, because that were you going to say something?
I was just gonna say, just to let everybody also know, like everything that I ate veggie wise in the last 5 years of my life was organic too. So it's not like I was eating, you know,
Yep.
some sprayed down lettuce,
Right,
and
right.
I was eating the best. I was spending $5 for tiny little thing of lettuce, of
Right.
microgreens. So I was eating the best of the best. So that again, are all vegetables bad for all people? No. I think there's certain people that can tolerate it, just like there's certain people that can tolerate other things.
Right.
And I think also like environmentally, like where you're raised and what grows naturally with where you're raised, like also falls into effect. And there are probably exceptions for every human. Like I'm sure there's certain things that each person could eat veggie wise, and it's going to benefit them and it's going to help them. But the idea that we could just go to a supermarket and then like there's every vegetable that's ever been grown in the world, and
Right.
just think that like anybody could just go and pick one, find one you like, and then just like it's going to help you. That's
No, it's
you're
not.
lying
It's not
yourself.
meant to be. It's not
No.
meant to be. You're right. And another thing that maybe they didn't even bother mentioning in your college level discussions of these things, and I'm sure that it goes a long way, especially with the growing movement now, is that it's a timing thing. It's the season. I mean, the blood moon would come up, and yeah, it was time to kill a few animals. It was time to get meat into your system. But
Right.
there were people that, of course, thrived on. You get a vegetable or a fruit, you got a bunch of seeds, all of a sudden you can grow some more. This is clearly meant to be also. We're not saying that you shouldn't grow vegetables, but it's very hard to make the right choices for yourself until you try.
Right. Right.
And Spiro, you've tried, So
Try.
it really does matter where you live. It does matter what's actually around you. It does matter what season it is. It
Right.
does matter.
Right.
The world is trying. The world is trying to show you what to eat when. It's
Right.
trying to show you when to plant, and that
Right.
again, that's a whole nother conversation for sure.
Right.
But and I'm glad you mentioned that, because everyone's different, and you've been a personal trainer, so you've helped people along with diets many times, along with
Right.
their fitness.
Right. And they
So
don't even tell you when you're going to be a personal trainer, when you're going, they don't even, it's a very, it's a very sketchy line that you're crossing when it
right,
comes to nutrition. And the bottom line is you talk to any health professional, they'll tell you diet is the most important thing. But when you're almost not legally authorized to be telling people how to eat, at least back, it's been years since I've been a certified trainer,
right,
but I guess it was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago when I was certified through American College of Sports Medicine, and like, you're not really supposed to. You could suggest something, but like they don't want you really telling them what to eat. They want your results to be had through exercise and through fitness, and if you're putting garbage in your body, or if you're just not putting, forget about garbage, even if you're just not putting the proper foods in your body for each individual, you're just never going to get the results you're looking to get
oh, physically, right, right, I see.
physically. So it's just so difficult. So that was another thing. It was just like I was telling people, I was suggesting people, my clients back in the day, like what to eat. But that was really what I would give myself that I felt good. Now, from what I know, I realize that everything is different for each person. So it's very tricky, and you really would have to. It's almost its own science. It really is its own science. But that's
Right,
another thing. The whole nutrition field is based off of my plate and my pyramid, and like having carbs and sugars as your main source of energy, which is only going to cause inflammation. It's only going to get free radicals going. It's only going to cause disease. It's just not the right way to live. And I'm basically, if 95% of nutritionists that are hearing me talk right now, they would say I'm crazy. But those 95%, they all have health problems. because there's
Right.
no, unless they're just genetic freaks, and and the bottom line, and they could sit there, and if you give a polygraph test, they'd be like, yeah, it doesn't really matter what I eat, I'm going to feel the same, whether I have this grilled chicken salad or I eat the McDonald's. And that's the bottom line. And a lot of those are the people that are trainers and nutritionists. They're just genetically predisposed to have an athletic build and to have an
Right.
athletic physique. And they really didn't work or sacrifice so many things. It was just they could eat what they want and do what they want, and then they go get the paper, they go get the certification, and now they're a nutritionist or a trainer.
Yeah, right. As it often is with lots of different professions now. It's just a
Right.
month or a year or some quick course or an online course even, and then they're experts or they're professionals, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
This all comes back to the one. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, not to throw stones, but almost every nutritionist that I've ever met had like weight issues. They were overweight, and
Interesting.
it's the most. That's worse than a doctor. That's worse than. I think that's worse than any field, more than a personal trainer. Like a personal trainer, maybe they want to be a little chunky, maybe they want to be a little thick. That's in their regimen, and maybe they don't care about eating. They're just, but like if you're a nutritionist, you should be a master. You should be an absolute master of every macro and micronutrient there is, and you should know exactly how to operate yourself and others. And they're not. They're going by what a book is said. They're going by just like what the FDA says, and it's really sad. It's a sad industry, and it's something that I wanted to do for so long. Like I really wanted to drop my major as a phys ed teacher and go be a nutritionist. And the more I looked into it, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to be put in a hospital somewhere, and I'm going to be told how to feed people, and I'm just the nutritionist that got the degree.
No,
so
you're right.
My own personal experimentation and research has gotten me well beyond any nutritionist that I've ever met. And I would like to speak to some nutritionists. You could reach out, contact me, and I would love to have a conversation if over any of this. So
good, and let's take that to heart. This is the point of a show like this, is to start more conversations with adult conversations where we can calmly speak to each other and turn this into positive, because that's what we want here. It's the complete opposite of the Oroidovic healers in Southern Asia. They look at your tongue and they know that you need to eat some piece of an animal you never heard of, and this is and they're right on the money. They look at your iris, they look at different parts of you that you wouldn't think lead to discussing how healthy you are, but they know. And it's so much more than just a training program or some college course or several college courses. It could be all the college courses you want. It doesn't mean too much until you really practice it, and those guys know what they're doing. As far as I've never been to one, but every time I hear about them or listen to them speak, they seem to know what they're talking about. And but again, this is all, and that whole My Plate thing, that's exactly the opposite of what we were just saying a few minutes ago, that there is no one stop shop for all your needs. There's no one pill that's going to do it. That plate can't work for everybody. That's impossible. I have no idea. I'm assuming that I'm right here, but it seems impossible that My Plate can work for every single human being on the earth. It's literally impossible to me. You're telling me somebody in the Himalayas can use this just like somebody who lives in California, New York, wherever? I don't see it. I don't see it.
Right.
So maybe we can, because we're getting to the end here. I think maybe we can end this.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say we could wrap up whatever one last topic if you'd like, and then.
Well, maybe we can. Let's quickly just end with there is one element we didn't quite touch on. Maybe we mentioned it earlier, with spirituality. We're not saying that you need to be, following religion or anything like that. We're saying that there is, in essence, something that you have to take in for yourself, a way that you have to know yourself, almost, if you want to put it in simple terms, that can accompany your journey as far as diet, health, anything like that. And speaking of words having power, what about these words diet and health? Why is it that the word diet has to have the word die in it? D-I-E, that is. Why is that in there? It bothers me so much. And the word health, yes, it has the word heal, but we say it as hell. Why in the world do these very important words have these very distinctly negative sounding things in them? I mean, die is, sometimes it's a point of transition, but hell, to be in the word health, the ones that we use. Any
Right.
quick word on that? It just seems so odd to me,
You know what's interesting? You've never mentioned that until now. That's very interesting. And your diet will definitely decide on when you will die,
There you go. Perfect.
and how you treat your health will certainly determine if you live in hell or not.
Wow. Now
So
there's
that's
the answer I was looking for. Wow. So words have so much power. Yes. But
right.
okay, so that can be a whole different world, but I want to mention that it's the kind of things I'm going to be looking for on this show. Why was
Right.
that word chosen for us in this particular language? I think this language was built from the ground up for a very specific reason that I'm going to go
Right.
into in a future episode. Just
Right.
language in general, just the whole art of language and how it works. But what about spirituality? The idea of maybe that the inside of us is actually the darkness and you can spark light in it with the proper health, the proper behavior, or just the idea of being spiritual in a certain way that can help you increase your gains in fitness, or to make your diet more effective for yourself almost immediately. If your approach when you went to the carnivore, you went in not as, oh, I can't wait to lose this weight so I look great in my selfies at the beach in the summer. That wasn't your mentality whatsoever. You
No.
went in head first with the best intentions for yourself, and for others, to help others at the same time.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, so tell us,
Yeah.
yeah, why don't we end with that? Give us whatever you can on that.
So I mean, from a from a spiritual standpoint, what you put in your body is going to, I guess, depending on how toxic that is to you or how much it helps you thrive, I think is going to play a huge role on your spirituality. And I mean, if you're putting in garbage foods and you're putting in all these things that are tainted, I think that's going to have a direct effect on your spiritual well-being. It's not going to be, you're going to be blocked. But if you're putting in things that come from a more, I guess you would say, pure source, I guess I'm saying that right. I believe that's going to heighten your ability to be able to thrive and align chakras and open the doors for your spiritual well-being.
Very interesting. Yes, it's really, it's a very long conversation that could be started right now, obviously. So we're going to avoid that. But it's really your, let's just call it mentality, even if we want to just use that. It's just
Right.
your mentality about it. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily, don't want the spirituality word to change your ideas about what we're trying to say here. But if your
well,
approach
let's-
is correct, I'm sure you have better results quicker. I'm assuming that you do.
For sure, for sure. I mean, when you put something into your body and it goes into your stomach, and your stomach feels horrible, anything that you have to do in your day is going to be hindered now, because
Right.
your body is trying to work that out. So your mind is affected, and if your mind is affected and your stomach is affected, then your spirit is going to be affected because you can't project yourself in that way. So it really does start like with what you put in, and how the body is going to take that, and then where it goes here, and then everything else.
Right. Right. Yeah, and
So
it's oh, go ahead.
yeah, I know. I mean, it's just think about a baby. Like if a baby has bad food or a stomach ache, they just cry. And they cry and they cry and they cry, and that's their existence. And it's like if you give the baby something good, think about how that baby would act, how like a happy baby acts, just like chilling and relaxed.
Yep.
So that's a simple example of how we have to tolerate it as adults. It's the same concept, like to go through your day and go through your work day and be in pain and struggling and running to the bathroom and this. And it's like how are you ever going to spiritually enlighten yourself? How are you ever going to mentally clarify things and focus on the things that you need to focus if what you're putting in your body is just wreaking havoc upon all these senses?
Good point. And that whole misnomer that babies just cry all day, we both know that is definitely not true. They can relax with you for many hours at a time with no fuss. It's not about parenting. It's just about their comfort levels in a certain way. If they're gassy,
Right.
they might be bothered, but that might be a food
Right.
thing too. And we didn't
Right.
even get into the whole, okay, let's just say we didn't have access to or did not want to ever be carnivores. That's fine. But how many hours of your year are taken up by farming if you were to farm just for yourself to make sure your family had enough food? Are you even able to hold what we call a job around here, or would that have to be your job? This is
Right.
one last thing to think about here. Is there's a lot more to the story, I think,
Yeah.
and based on the history we're given, we can only know so much. But we have to use our instincts, and we have to use what our resources and our available local things that we can use and take advantage of, as for our own health, of course. And that's
100%.
again 100%. Exactly. This is a conversation for a whole another day. There'll be plenty more where that came from. So Spero, if you want to give any info at all, no pressure, of course. But if you do want people to contact you and have, even if they want your advice, or if they do want to have a conversation because they're coming from the complete opposite side of things, which is fine. We want to have conversations here. This
Oh
is a
yeah,
place for adults to speak.
100%. I welcome all opinions, and just as much as like I said, I've walked down this path. I'm sure there's people that have walked down another path, that might be a completely opposite direction of mine. And if me and that person, go head to head and talk and teach each other, then there could be even more to be found with everything. So there's never an end, to nutrition and to health and to diet and all these things. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they could reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is at Spero Gin, one word. They can reach out to me on Instagram, Spero_Gin. I guess those are my two. Yeah, that's
Great.
good for now.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's plenty. And I guess I'll leave us with this, an idea from Plato's book, The Republic, is that the guards knew that they were getting the meat, and the people in the Republic, the peasants, so to speak, they were getting grains, and that is on purpose. So they could not have the muscular fortitude to revolt or do anything that was necessary to fight back against tyranny or anything of that nature. It's a much more detailed thing to quote, but that's the general idea of it.
That's very interesting.
Grain for you, meat for us. So that way
There
you
you
don't
go.
get strong enough.
You can't. You don't have the aminos. Yep, you can't.
And you can't. Right.
Yep. And
So
Hippocrates once said, "Let thy food be thy medicine. Let thy medicine be thy food."
100%. So there you go. A little
Right.
history for us, and so much more, and plenty more to come in the near future.
Right.
Thanks for watching, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, George.
No problem at all.